But it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate
You
it.
too. Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this.
Yes, sir. So I want to begin our conversation before we get into your life and before we get into your work with consulting by asking you, looking at the calendar 4 years ago, we were wrapping our heads around a global pandemic. How did you
Mhm.
get through the COVID-19 time and how did it change you?
Well, it was really interesting for us because my son is a cancer survivor, and so he was diagnosed in 2019. So we pretty
Wow.
much went into quarantine in 2019 because when you're a child and going through chemotherapy and radiation and all that, you have no immune system at all.
Yeah.
So we had been living a quarantine lifestyle for about a year and a half before the pandemic came. So for us, it really didn't change a whole lot. It kind of, we were looking forward to getting out and doing things finally, and then we couldn't, but so it didn't really change a whole lot. So as we came into that area of time, it really was just deciding what we were going to do. And coming out of cancer, going right into COVID, it just really allowed even more reflection on life, what's important, our values, how we want to raise our son, my marriage, my business, everything kind of came up during that time. So our big, I guess, project during COVID was we sold our house and bought an RV and started traveling. That's how we dealt with it. is
Yeah.
we is we kind of just did our own thing. And yeah, it was a interesting time for a lot of people. For us, it was we were scared to death of COVID at that point because my son had, his immune system was down, but the lifestyle around that we were pretty much attuned with already, and we
Yeah.
just kind of kept doing what we were doing.
I always admire everybody that decided to do that, to get on the road, to get out there, because that is the ultimate idea of existentialism meets, kind of manifest destiny. Just get out
Yeah.
there and do it. I mean, and I think that's the thing I realize about humanity now, post going through this, is that there's a strength, there's a vision, there's a vigor, there's something different that's about all of us. It's like
Mhm.
there was a show on HBO called Left Behind, and it was about the rapture.
Mm.
And sometimes I look at all of us and I'm like, we're here. We're still here. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
not in a morbid way, but just, we went through, not only did we go through like, just the whole thing that was physical about it, but the lunacy of politics and the silliness of
Absolutely.
all the both sides. There was a movie that came out that my wife was watching during that time, and it literally depicted a global pandemic, and all of it's true. You had the people that were getting on everybody about masks that that
Hmm.
that were ultra, and then you had the others were just thinking scientifically about it. And just the
Right.
whole thing was bizarre. So
It really was.
um
It was a weird time to be alive, but it's also I like what you alluded to. It's we did it.
yeah,
We're still here, and it was not without loss. It was not without suffering. It was
sure.
not without any of that for a lot of people. But I think we did readjust our values as far as what we want out of our work life. What do we want out of our living situations? Why do we need this big of a house? Do we need a bigger house? There was just a lot of
Yeah,
questions that were coming up.
yeah.
Yeah,
Or do you put a house on wheels? How do you do that? That kind of a thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So when you look on paper and you see that somebody's involved with consulting, there's so much more that goes into it. Consulting tends to simplify or oversimplify what somebody
Mhm.
does. So what I want to do is put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day. And one of the kids looks up and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
I would answer the child. I would say, I help mom and dad make more money so that they can spend more time with you.
That's and they would love that. Totally.
Yeah, yeah. That
So
that's exactly how I would say it.
so let me ask you this. When you were in the third grade, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a fireman, and
Okay.
so which was, and then that slowly morphed into an architect, and then here I am.
Yeah. Well, I understand. I was a kid of the 80s, so I thought Chips was cool. And
Absolutely.
I wanted to be with Pancho. And then I
Yeah.
saw in my teen years the cops, and I was like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's the version of this that I want.
Right. It's a little too
So,
real now. It's a little too real.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, way too much. So let
Yeah.
me ask you this. Tell me where you were born and raised and how these seeds got into you to be a consultant, to want to help people. How did you evolve to this point in your life?
I was born in North Carolina in Winston-Salem, which is about halfway between Raleigh and Charlotte. So, good area to eat some soul food if you're into that. But
Yeah.
that's where I was born. My grandfather was an entrepreneur out of necessity. He lived in a small mill town in North Carolina where they would build a factory, and then they would build a bunch of identical houses, and they would promise the workers, if they came to work in the factory, they'd give them a house to live in or a small fee for the house. So my grandfather lived in a mill town. Well, when the mill closed, everyone's like, what are we going to do for money? So my grandfather opened a gas station. And that really started the lineage of entrepreneurship. My father was an entrepreneur. He started an insurance business, ended up buying a pretty sizable agency, and then retired from that when he sold it. And so my dad didn't go into entrepreneurship out of necessity, but I did after, I started my business the year before my son was diagnosed. I didn't really get serious about it until I had to, when my son was in the hospital. And I said, okay, wow, it costs money to do this, and we've got to make choices based on health, not finances. So I was thrown into it kind of out of necessity. But the real turning point for me was, it was probably December of 2014, and it was 2 weeks, a week and a half before I got my end of year bonus, and all that thing was going on. And I was called into my boss's office at 4:58 on a Friday afternoon,
Oh
and
no.
they let me go, no severance, no bonus, nothing like that.
Wow.
And that was the point where I was like, I'm not going to let anyone have their thumb on me as far as what I earn and what I make and my time anymore, because it was a small company. There was probably 20 employees there. And I
Yeah.
was like, even at a company like that, which should be a mom and pop, I was very disposable.
Yeah.
And the way that it was approached proved that. And so I just kind of really got angry about it. And I said, I'm not gonna do that anymore.
Yeah.
It's too volatile. I don't want to do that. Nothing against corporate. I spent almost 15 years in corporate, but that really started me into entrepreneurship. Then I got into like, oh, my grandfather did it. I remember that, similar situation. Like, he lost his job, had to create a business, and that's where he ended up dying working in that business, and at a reasonable age. And so um, that just kind of got me down the path where I've made it a mission that since 2014, 2015, I've signed my own checks since then. I've never gotten a paycheck from anyone else outside of, my clients, but that really was my motivator to get into it.
It's amazing how we can learn from the good, magnanimous experiences in this life as much as we can from the heartache, because I,
Absolutely.
I know there's been moments when I got out of corporate and I was kind of in the same way. I was called in and the whole thing happened. And
Hmm.
I remember going into nonprofit at that time. And I'd always kind of had my eye on it. And that really, really kind of opened me up to so many things that I would have never seen before. So,
Yeah.
you know, yeah,
Same
it's
situation.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about your grandfather. There's a big gas station conglomerate in Kansas City. It's kind of Midwest called Quick Trip, and we love
Hmm.
it. It's like the place to go. It's always packed. You can never get in and out. And I was reading to see where they were at, and the concentration is in the Midwest, but they're huge. And it was just a guy that started it up. I think it was a father and son, maybe. And they just kind of came up with the idea of a grocery store within the gas station. And now
Yeah.
it's this behemoth, and it's crazy. I love because it's like sports. I'm a big sports fan. So I love reading that rags to riches kind of a thing where it's like someone just has this little idea and then it
Yep.
just boom, it turns into this behemoth. It's wild.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's a story of Bucky's too. Obviously when
Yeah.
when we were traveling, we stopped at. I love places like that because we could pull our giant camper through there, and it was kind of catered to us, And with a son, it's like we need to take a break and get some stimulation going. And so but Bucky's was a great. It was a great company, and then I think the great grandson took it to a new level that they didn't even see come, made it sort of an icon at
Yeah.
that point. And I think it came about around the COVID time too. And so, yeah, I think it's really fascinating to hear those stories where it creates a legacy, and then it reinvents itself as
Yep.
it's, doing its thing. And then the season of life comes where it's like, I think I would like to get gas and find something to eat at the same time that's not
Yeah.
a hot dog, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah, it's fascinating to me. We got to experience a ton of things like that as we traveled, especially through the Midwest, which we loved, and out in the West Coast, where we got to experience some really interesting businesses that were really just that kind of grassroots, out of necessity,
Yeah.
just we're going to put it here and people will come kind of thing.
It's kind of like In-N-Out Burger, which is going to stay on the West Coast. It's like
Yeah,
that idea, which is phenomenal food, and and it's
yeah,
and it's an institution now. So yeah, it's wild.
it
So
is.
let me ask you this: Who's been a hero for you in your life? Who's been an inspiration for the work that you've done?
My son, hands down, and he didn't choose that. It was something that, just the way that he showed up through what he was going through at 4 years old. He's now 9, and is doing great. But he and I had a lot of conversations that you shouldn't be having with a 4 or 5 year old, you
Yeah,
know,
man.
and so it really it forced me actually to be a better dad, to talk to him, to listen to him more. And through that listening, he really taught me about what's important. And he taught me about, how to run a business, not from the sense of, sales or the P&L or anything like that, but how to treat people in business. And, I think one of the big things that I learned from him was perspective. And it's really easy to say, this isn't for you, or this is who this is for, or anything like that. But we have to ask more questions. I think we have to show a little more humanity in our business. And a quick story. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but I've got the tattoo of the word trucks on my
Yeah,
arm.
yeah,
And that was, he and I had a conversation early on when he was in the hospital. I didn't have any tattoos at the time. And I said, my son's name is Baxley. I said, I want to get a tattoo. Should I get, or spiritual family? Should I get faith, believe, survive? What should I get? And he was 4, and he thought about it for a quick second, a hot second. And he said, get trucks, Daddy. I like trucks. And I thought it was the funniest thing ever. And 2 weeks went by, and I was like, you know what? If I should get trucks. Like, that would, what a way to pay an honor. And then as I reflected on it years and years later, as we got out of cancer and started doing our thing, I was like, if I had gotten what I thought I was going to get on my arm, every time I looked down, I would have been reminded of the pain. I got trucks, and I look down and I laugh almost every time.
yeah,
And it just brings up this moment, this tender moment between me and my son that I will never forget.
yeah,
And him just being pure and innocent and honest. I get a little emotional even just like going back there. But
yeah,
so it was gifts like that he was able to deliver. And of course, I have other heroes in my journey as well. The people that you probably know that are writing the books and doing all this stuff. But
sure.
if you talk about the single most innocent, biggest impact on my life, has been my son, 100%.
My son's on the spectrum, on the
Mhm.
autism spectrum. He has it's technically a long arm on his 15 chromosome, but he's been in therapies his whole life, and he's been in the SPED community. And I think about that with him too. Just
Yeah.
everything that he has to do to adapt and to be a part of this world. But it shows you so much, and there's a level
Mhm.
of just innocence and just purity that goes into all of that. That's, as a
Yeah.
parent, that's a big deal.
It's a big deal. I wasn't prepared for it, but I'm luckily I'm quick on my feet. And so I got
Yeah,
prepared really quick. And, and I think the level of conversations that he and I have now, we're 3 years in remission, and he's doing great. He's a third grade honor roll student. And, but he and I are having conversations that I'm really proud of now. Like,
yeah,
I feel like we communicate just on a different level than we would have otherwise.
for sure. So let me ask you this: if you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now that you find fascinating, who would it be? Who would you love to meet and talk to?
Oh my gosh, there's so many people. Whew, I I'm going to be very careful because I could throw out the hip, the Michael Jordans of the world, who
Yeah,
I'd love to sit and chat with. But um, I really think, I mean, I think I would like to talk to Elon Musk, not from a sense of like, you've done great things, space, all that jazz, but more in like, what is his process
yeah,
for conceptualizing an idea? Like, he's if we zoom out, we some of the ideas he's come up with are pretty ridiculous,
yeah,
pretty like no way man ideas.
yeah,
If you told it to your buddies at a poker game, they'd be like, come on, get out of
yeah,
here, like they wouldn't be it. But for some reason, like, he's got the audacity, some might say, or the guts or the courage or whatever it is, to say, yes, this is a crazy idea, but it might be what the world needs in this moment. It might be the advancement that takes place. And I don't know a lot about his personal character to know whether to dive into that world. But what I do know is, like, he had a huge idea, and he had a lot of pros going for him as far as finances and things like that, and backing and all that. But how do you, in your brain, take this big idea and make it happen?
yeah.
Like, how do you, what needs to happen inside of you as a person to do that? So I think I would probably talk to him or someone like him.
So in June of 2020, when everybody was outside and we were trying to figure out what we were going to do with our lives, SpaceX went over our house, and I thought it was the spaceship. I was like,
Oh,
uh-oh, here it is. I
there it
finally get to
is.
see it.
Yeah.
and it was just this big, huge diode of lights that just went in like this big line, and then it kind of fanned out, and then it came back together almost like an 80s Atari game, and then it
Yeah.
all just went towards the horizon and all the dots went away. And I was just like, wow, it was wild,
Yeah. It's
you know.
amazing.
But that's what you're talking about. It's that idea that,
Yeah.
I'm going to come up with this idea, and people are like, well, NASA does that. I'm sure that was the first response, or space
Absolutely.
program, but
Yeah.
this dude's like, well, I made a lot of money from PayPal. Let's go, you
Yeah.
know?
And when we were traveling, we used Starlink for our internet service, which is a SpaceX program.
Yeah.
And we were right outside of San Francisco in Santa Cruz, I believe, in a valley. And I had 0 bars on my cell phone. We had zero Wi-Fi from the place we were staying. There was nothing.
Yeah.
And that was the day that we got Starlink. And all of a sudden we're up and running and we're streaming YouTube and we're
Uh-huh.
like, so it's like, wow, okay, that's interesting. And he's doing
Yeah.
it by low flying satellites. And just the thoughts behind things like that are just fascinating to me.
Yeah. What that Santa Cruz, that whole area over there is great. I love that coastal area.
Amazing. It's
Beautiful.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
So, what's been one of your favorite client success stories as a consultant?
Um, uh, that I keep my clients for a long time normally. So most of them don't come in for a month or two. Most of them stay a year or more. I had a client for about 2.5 years, and when she came in, she was morbidly obese, and she had a $10 million company, and she just physically couldn't grow it. She didn't have any. She needed naps. She couldn't drive more than 2 hours at a time. She had to go to sleep. And so I knew right away that I'm not a health coach. I have my own health journey that as a 50-year-old dad, I try to do yoga once in a while. And I try to eat right, but I called a buddy of mine who is, and we kind of got her into that, working with him. And then I started to work on the business and the mindset around this weight loss. And she was just north of 400 pounds at that point. And over the 2.5 years that she and I worked together, she and I are still good friends. She was able to lose about 160 pounds and
Wow.
grew her business from 10 million to 30 million. And her daughter, she took up ballroom dancing. So when we professionally, decided it was time for her to go on to the next. She was a competitive ballroom dancer, had just gotten back from Vegas, and she came down for a VIP day with me, and I took her surfing, and she never in a million years thought she would surf. And I'm not a surfer, but we went out and just we got a couple small waves, and to me, it's like the money's great, the finance is great, but the reason I'm proud of that is one because we had this conversation. I said, if you look back at your life over 3 years, would you have predicted that you would be sitting on a beach surfing, flying back, and then going to dance class, and then flying to Vegas and competing in a international ballroom dance competition, and that your business would be doing north of $30 million in sales a year? Not only that, but now your daughter is dancing and kickboxing and she's modeling behavior for her kids. And so her 13-year-old daughter is now competing in ballroom dancing, doing all these things. And I think the life transformation where she came in looking for something and wasn't quite sure what it was and was trying to just grow the business so that she felt something. And what we were able to do over the couple of years is really 180 her life, 180 her business, create a pivot, and change the trajectory. Like she will die a different person than she would have otherwise.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I mean, who doesn't want that to be part of their resume?
Yeah.
Like,
For
who
sure.
doesn't want that as the moment you say in things like this, where you go, that was a very proud moment that I had a very small role in, but I still claim it. And when she flew down, I made sure I said, we're going to do two things. One thing you probably never thought you were going to do, and another thing I probably never thought I was going to do. So I took her surfing, and then we went dancing. My wife, her, and I all went dancing because I don't dance. I'm not a dancer at all. I play
Yeah.
music, but I'm not a dancer.
Yeah.
And so I think when you have moments like that in your career, those are kind of the pillar posts that you have to hold on to and say, okay, when things get tough, that is what keeps me going.
For
You know.
sure. So you have to give a lot of good advice to your clients. What's the best advice that you've ever gotten?
Ooh, best advice I've ever gotten. My dad was, as I said before, he was an entrepreneur, business guy. I was born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s. And so I would wait for him to come home in my football jersey. We had a big oak tree in our front yard, and he would get out of his car with his suit on, not even go inside, and we'd throw some passes. and he would always throw it where it was like 6 inches out of reach where I could almost get it, and I was, probably 10 or 12 years old. And he would say to me all the time, if you touch it, you should catch it.
Wow.
And if you touch it and don't catch it, it means you're missing a skill that or you need to either get faster, more agile, grip strength. There's something in there that you can work on, you can control that will allow you to catch the next one. And so I always just said, um, not just in business, but in life, it's like if you have an idea of the man you want to be or the person you want to be, that's your version of touching it. And if you touch it, you should catch it.
Yeah, that's
And so
awesome.
that was probably the best advice that has just stayed with me throughout the years, and it's allowed me to take big risks and do some interesting things.
It's kind of an old guy thing to do, though, is to throw it just a little bit out of range. I love doing that with models. I just
Yeah.
want him to go. I just want him to,
It's
because every time, yeah, he does that and he gets it, he's just freaking out, and that's good.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you're
it's
just
good.
pushing him. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So let me ask you this: of all of these things that you've done and with your life and you've seen and you've evolved into, what are you the proudest of?
I am the proudest of our nonprofit. We used to run a nonprofit when we were traveling. That was the mission behind the travel. We were blessed enough to have a huge support system when we were going through our treatment, and just a lot of people caring for us and egging us on and helping out, mowing the grass, doing whatever we needed. And then we also met a lot of families that didn't have that. And so we started a nonprofit while we were in treatment when we were traveling. As we traveled for about 18 months, we helped over 400 families who were battling pediatric cancer. And we would sit at their house and take them a wagon and things like that. And for me, looking back, it was like I was hurting in my own right, and my family was hurting in our own right. And one of the things that we didn't think of it in the moment, but one of the ways that we healed was by helping other people. And I'm very proud of that. I think I'll always be proud of that. I think I will try to duplicate that in some form or fashion in the future. But that was something that I can't find a negative thing that happened through that experience of helping other people. I can't
Yeah,
find a single negative component to it
yeah,
at all.
yeah. That's awesome. So everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I'm on a divine mission, and that's the only way I can keep going. It's yeah, and it's not one that will ever be done. It's
Yeah,
just I think it's really is, I you can say what you want, consulting, coaching, selling ice cream, business, entrepreneurship, whatever it is. Ultimately, if you're in business, you're designed to help someone and you're designed to solve a problem. And if you accept that mission, you probably have a really powerful future ahead of you and one that's very fulfilling in many, many ways. And so I think that's kind of my perception of me, is that I am on a mission. I tell people all the time, I say, I've been through what I've been through in life because I know I can take a virtual punch, a metaphorical punch. I have the strength now to do that. And sometimes I have to take a punch for other people.
yeah,
And if I'm willing to do that, then I find that their trajectory changes a little bit. And so that's my mission, is to kind of help people finish the book a lot stronger than they started in
yeah.
some way.
I
You
like
know,
it. What a great quote. So, Kevin, if anyone wants to hire you, reach out, learn more about you, any of the good business, where do they go?
my website's the best. It's where you can kind of choose your path and choose your poison, so to speak. But mynextcrest.com is the website. It'll tell you all about the work I do, give you some insight, and then you can kind of choose where you go from there, from free offers to, hey, how do I become an actual client? It's all there for you.
Excellent, Kevin. This has been wonderful. I love it, man. Keep doing the good work.
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate it.